what happens, there's a rule for which direction each field will move in. And I'm not going to try to teach you what that rule is, but well, you can pretty well predict which way it's going to have to be for a situation like this, because the field is not going to go backwards. That wouldn't make any sense. Unfortunately, it works out as it should. In this circumstance like this, the radiation is outward. So I can't do that very well on the board, but maybe I could do that and simulate what's going on. That's an overly simplified idea of how a radiating electromagnetic field is created by a simple horizontal dipole antenna. And as I said, the frequency is determined by the length of the wire. Now it's possible to make that piece of wire, that antenna, radiate at a different frequency by, well, pushing it, you might say. But it will have a natural resonant frequency. If we could get something like that going, it wouldn't last long, because we can't make energy out of nothing. There's energy involved in getting this current to, getting these electrons to slosh back and forth in the first place. But some of that energy is being converted into a radiating electromagnetic field, and that energy has to come somewhere. What would happen is that whatever we started very quickly would die out and it'd be gone. If we want to keep it going, we're going to have to attach a source of energy of some kind to this, and that source is simply a transmission line. There's two wires going off to our transmitter, and normally the current in one of these is going to be up, and the current in the other is going to be going down. These currents are alternating currents at radio frequency. Well, that works out just right, doesn't it? For the particular circumstances that I illustrated here, this current is going to flow in this direction. Look here. This current is going to be flowing out of the transmission line into the antenna, and this current is going to be flowing down into the transmission line. Just the way it should be. So, what our transmitter does with the transmission line carrying energy up is maintaining this sloshing back and forth of electrons in the antenna and keeping up the radiating electromagnetic wave. This is the part that was missing. It really belongs in another chapter, which happens next week. But next week,
that's my chapter.
Didn't happen last week. Pardon?
That's my chapter, antennas.
That was on the other way. All right. So, transmission lines themselves are a means for getting energy from the transmitter, where we create it, up into the antenna, where it will radiate outwards as an electromagnetic wave, and where it can be picked up anywhere where one has something suitable to detect it, and another antenna is the thing that'll do it. Polarization. By definition, the polarization of any electromagnetic wave is the direction of the electric field at any particular point in space. Well, by the very nature of the way this is set up, we see that the electric field just happens to be in the same direction as the wire itself. Actually, I really shouldn't say direction, because the wire itself, it has two directions really, doesn't it? So let's just say orientation. The orientation of the electric field is the same as the orientation of the antenna. And this works for any simple antenna. For instance, a vertical antenna obviously is going to have the electric field vertically, and a wave radiating from a vertical antenna is going to be vertically polarized. There's a very common myth I hear over and over again about somebody using a vertical antenna to receive from a station that's radiating a signal horizontal orientation, saying, well, your signal's weak because our polarization of our antennas is different. This is pure nonsense. Why? At HF frequencies up to roughly 30 megahertz, the signal reflects off the ionosphere, unless you're across the street or something like that. Polarization of an electromagnetic wave, whether it's radio or light or anything else, will only maintain its orientation, its polarization, if it reflects off a smooth surface, a smooth conducting surface. Is the ionosphere smooth? No, it's nothing but. Actually, the ionosphere is a layer of ionized particles, air molecules that are ionized, and it's anything but flat. And it's also quite chaotic. The result is that whether a signal is coming from a vertically polarized antenna or a horizontally polarized antenna, it gets scrambled. It's not much different than watching light as it's reflected off a choppy water surface. That light is very badly scrambled and scattered in all directions. And the polarization of the light is also scattered. In the case of light, it doesn't matter, because the polarization of most light sources is scattered to begin with. So that part of it won't change. So if you hear somebody saying, your signal is weak because I've got a vertical antenna and you've got a horizontal antenna, you know he doesn't know what he's talking about, but don't tell him. If he was a friend, you'll lose a friend, because he'll think you don't know what you're talking about. People don't like to be told it's wrong. However, it happens too often, I guess. All right. You'll hear amateurs speaking very frequently of working the 40-meter band, or I found some DX on 3.57 or something, speaking in terms of frequency and sometimes speaking of wavelength. For newcomers, this must surely be very, very confusing. Why can't you all speak in wavelength? Or why can't you always speak in frequency? Why back and forth between these? Well, it happens that there's a fixed relationship between these two. And it's a very simple one. Anything anybody wants to get out of this anymore? Good. That will disappear. Forever. That's the very simple relationship that occurs between the frequency and the wavelength of all electromagnetic radiation. This is frequency. This funny looking thing here, in case you haven't seen it before, is the equivalent of our letter L, L for Lima, in Greek, which is called lambda. And it's traditionally used to indicate wavelength, so I'm just following tradition. That's wavelength. Anybody know what C is?
Speed of light.
Hmm?
Speed of light.
That's what it is, yes. And it's a constant. And it's very fast. Can't catch up to it.
Not yet.
Anybody know what it is?
3.08 times 10 to the 8.
You don't need to be here, do you?
That was a pretty big guess.
Yeah.
Actually, we normally use just 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second. Three times 10 to the... That's not right, is it? I got too many 10s. I've done things like that before and not noticed them. Must have confused people terribly. 3 times 10 to the 8th meters per second, which happens to be 300,000 kilometers per second. I'm sure everybody can get a better grip on that. 300,000 kilometers per second. And if you're still stuck in miles an hour, I think that's 146,000 miles per hour.
That was 180 something.
Hmm?
Is it 186,000 miles?
Maybe it is 186. Yeah. I've got a calculator here and I can figure it out in a moment, but...
Sorry, I'm being anal.
It's fast.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, if when you're outside on a nice, bright, sunny day, and if someone were able to pull a cord and turn off the sun, you wouldn't know what had happened for 8 minutes. Because at the speed of light, it takes about 8 minutes for the radiation from the sun to get to us here. So we wouldn't know that a disaster had happened for 8 whole minutes. When you think of the enormous size of the universe, the light that we are able to see coming from the far reaches of the universe has taken millions of years to get to us. And at that particular speed, it's really it's beyond any imagination. This gives an idea of how immense the universe is. But that's the simple relationship that exists between frequency and wavelength. The product of the two is equal to the speed of light. You've got to be careful. You've got to express the frequency in hertz and the wavelength in meters. That's no big deal. But it means that if you happen to be given the wavelength in feet, you're going to have to convert it first. And if you happen to want a result in feet, you're going to have to convert it back. But everybody should be able to do that. And even if you can't, most calculators today have converters built into them for the unwashed. So it shouldn't be any problem for anybody. Just a little example that I created here. Supposing you know, you hear people talking about 80 meters, the 80 meter band. Well, what frequency is that? So, 80 meters, what on earth is the frequency? Well, just rearrange this little equation just a little bit. Multiply both sides by lambda, and, I'm sorry, divide both sides by lambda, and you end up with that. And that's 3 times 10 to the 8th divided by, well, 80 meters is 80 meters, isn't it? No conversion needed there. And I just happen to remember what that was, which I calculated this afternoon with my calculator, but I really didn't need to. That was 3.75 megahertz. The answer you'll get in your calculator, of course, is 3.75 times 10 to the 6th, and that's 3.75 megahertz. Actually, that's right square in the middle of the 80 meter band. The 80 meter band actually extends all the way from 3.5 to 4.0 megahertz. So when we speak of a band, we're usually referring to, in terms of wavelength, you know, somewhere within the band. In this case, it just happens to land right in the middle. And it's just as easy to do the same thing for any other now. In almost all books, they provide you with a cooked up formula to calculate the length of an antenna. And it's cooked up so that you can put the information in feet. Well, you can cook up these formulas to fix up anything you want. You know, I have a formula that requires magnetic field and distance and current, and hook up the formula so you can use milliamperes and feet and some other crazy thing. But it really doesn't make a lot of sense to do this. The most sensible thing to do is you just use a standard formula, use the basic units that it's intended to be used in, like this, and do your conversions as necessary at the beginning and the end. This is what all engineers and scientists do. People do like, though, to have things hooked up to do things just to, you know, exactly the way they want to, and as a result, we end up with all sorts of specialized formulas to help you over the rough spots. So there's the connection between frequency and wavelength. The next thing we run into with respect to all transmission lines is characteristic impedance. I don't need this anymore, but I don't need the board anymore, at least not for a bit, so we'll just read that there. All transmission lines have what is known as a characteristic impedance. For I should have mentioned first that we have two basic kinds of transmission line: open wire line and coaxial cable. I brought some examples of both here. Where did I put them? At least I thought I brought some examples of both. I certainly have an example of coaxial cable, but I must have forgotten to bring that ladder line with me. I did. I knew I'd forgotten something. However, the notes that I handed out to you do have an illustration of sorts. All parallel wire transmission line is exactly as it's described. It's two wires parallel to each other, and the characteristic impedance they have is depends upon the diameter of those conductors and also on the spacing between them. So I do need to back my background. Suppose these represent the two parallel conductors of some open wire line. We're looking into the end of them. We have this distance between their centers. And then we have the diameter of the conductors themselves. There's a formula that makes use of both of those. It's in this book. You don't need to know that formula, but you do need to know that the characteristic impedance of the parallel wire transmission line depends upon those two values. Actually, it depends upon the ratio. What's the ratio of the problem? I don't remember. Doesn't matter. It does depend upon those two quantities. And if those two quantities remain the same, that is, supposing you double this and you double this, in other words, increase them in proportion, the characteristic impedance stays the same. So we can, if we want to, make a parallel wire transmission line if we've got fine enough wire so you can hardly see the space between them, or if we want one that's capable of handling a lot of power, we can increase the size of the conductor and the spacing between them proportionally and actually without limit. A very powerful broadcast station might use a parallel wire transmission line that's spaced by a foot. Ladder line, which I meant to bring with me and forgot, the wires are spaced by about 1 inch. And the webbing between them, which is the same plastic material that's used as insulation of the wires, is, I believe, polyethylene, very common plastic. And they cut away some of that in between, some of that webbing in between, just to reduce the, I was going to say reduce the cost, that won't matter very much actually. It reduces the weight, and it also reduces the wind profile. And that's one of the problems with ladder line. It does have a rather big, broad wind profile, and it blows around in the wind quite a bit. Not everything is all advantages, and that's one of the disadvantages of ladder line. The other common transmission line is coaxial cable. Here's a very small piece of coaxial cable here. This, I'm pretty sure, is RG58. I don't know whether it's marked or not. Yes, it is. Should be. Yes, it's RG58A with a couple of VNC connectors on the end of it. You can't have that. I've got some more things here to pass around actually, but I'm holding off to that for a moment or two. With we have a similar situation with coaxial cable as far as characteristic impedance goes, and of course they're perfect circles and they have the same center. Okay. The characteristic impedance, well, this is the inner conductor, and you've got a space here which may be filled with plastic. In some kinds of large coaxial cable, it's not even coaxial cable at all, it's two copper cylinders, one inside the other. You might call the inside one a pipe and the other one an even bigger pipe. In any event, the characteristic impedance depends upon these two ratios. The outer diameter of the inner conductor and the inner diameter of the outer conductor. That again you'll find as a formula in the book here, which you do not have to know, but you do need to know that the impedance of a coaxial transmission line does depend upon these two quantities. And once again, I think you can see that if you increase these two by the same proportion, the characteristic impedance will stay the same. And it does indeed turn out that coaxial, 50 ohm coaxial cable in particular, can be had in with diameters, outer diameters including the jacket, of as little as about 2 millimeters up to at least 15 centimeters. Like many years ago, I had the opportunity to visit the transmitter room of the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation up in the CN Tower in Toronto. They have two 50 kilowatt transmitters up there, 50,000 watts, one for the English service and the other for the French service. The coaxial transmission lines used inside the building are approximately 6 inches in outer diameter. Why do they need them so big? It's a matter of voltage. If you tried to use a coaxial cable the size of those, the voltages would be too great, and they would flash across between the outer and inner conductors immediately, and the cable would just vaporize. It wouldn't do the transmitter any good either. So you can get, it's possible to build coaxial cables and parallel wire transmission lines for any impedance you want, pretty well any size you want. In both of these cases, keep in mind too, though, that if you change this diameter and leave this one alone, then the impedance of the cable will change. And again, with coaxial cables, they're available with, I don't know whether impedances below 50 ohms that are available or not, but there's certainly many impedances available above 50 ohms. The cable industry uses, their standard is, I think 75, is it 75 ohms, really?
What's that?
The impedance of the coaxial cable used by the
72? 75
internet people and cable television.
Cable television is supposed to be 72. 75 is close enough.
Oh yeah, no problem there. I don't know why they had to be different. Maybe just because they had to be different. Generally speaking, the quality of the coaxial cable used for Cable TV is not as good as the quality of the 50 ohm cable used for broadcasting purposes.
Video requires 72 ohms.
Video
So that,
tape,
yeah, so instead of making changes, so they stuck video and cable, same impedance.
in other words, video was there first, and so the cable industry just followed suit.
Yeah.
It's perfectly reasonable.
They used the same cable.
A matter of history rather than a matter of a technical matter.
Yeah.
And there are higher impedances available too, I believe, for one reason or another, but 50 ohms is by far the most common for coaxial cable. Of course, with coaxial cable, we need a way to connect them to things. You know, with a coaxial cable, you can't just cut away the insulation and connect the two conductors. This would be a disaster. We have to maintain the geometry from one place to another. And there's a very, very wide variety of connectors available for different purposes, different qualities, different impedances of cable and so forth. And when you add to that the almost unlimited number of adapters to get from one cable type to another, it's nobody can afford to buy all of them, I don't think. You can buy adapter kits, some nice, neat, gold-plated boxes, and most of them cost several $100. I brought my coaxial cable returned. I'll send it around again, along with some common connectors. The most common connector of all, it's what's known as the PL259, which is this, a male connector. And it in your radio will fit the bulkhead type connector like this, which I'm going to pass this around. It's got holes in it for mounting to a chassis. You should take that and unscrew it and screw it up again just to see what it looks like and feels like, and pass it on to your neighbor. You don't need to do that. You've done that
many times.
many times.
What's that cable, Bob? Is that 8?
Which?
This cable looks like...
Oh, the cable that's on it is one of the larger diameter cables. It's not identified. This is the same size as RG213 and RG214 and RG8 and several others. You can get an idea of what the coaxial cable actually looks like from that. I don't know where I got that. I don't really even know if the connector's any good. It's a demonstration piece now. That particular connector belongs to what we call the UHF series. UHF stands for Universal High Frequency. This book says it means Unified High Frequency. Actually, I'm not sure which of those two is right, but what can be said unquestionably is that it does not stand for Ultra High Frequency. Actually, it turns out that the UHF series of connectors is a very, very poor performer at ultra high frequency. It's the last thing you should use rather than the first. On the other hand, what you should use, if you ever need it for ultra high frequencies, is the N connector. And I have some samples of that here. First, I have here an N right angle connector. This is one of the many, many different varieties of connector that are available. This is sort of an adapter sort of thing to go around corners, but it illustrates both what the male and female look like, because it's female at this end and it's male at the other end. I have an adapter here which goes from a male N to a female BNC. And I'll just connect those two together. And we've got a coaxial cable here with BNC connectors on it. And the BNC is a bayonet type connector. I'll just attach that. And you can look at that and play with it. We'll pass it on to your neighbor. N is said to stand for Navy. Whatever, it is the premium, the best of the common connectors. It's also quite expensive. That adapter that I showed you, that right angle adapter, which is type N at both ends, if you had to buy one of those brand new today, I'm pretty sure you'd be looking at least $50. I did not pay $50 for that one. I got that surplus somewhere for probably about $250 a long time ago. I thought I might find it useful someday. This is probably the first use I've ever had to make of it. You can tell it's quite old because it's sort of tarnished. You want another one?
Is the end connector waterproof?
Yes.
It is. Okay.
It's waterproof and weatherproof. However, wherever coaxial connectors are used outdoors, whether they're rated as weatherproof or not, and by the way, the PL259 is not weatherproof or waterproof or much of anything else except cheap. It's advisable to wrap the connector with some kind of sealing tape. And ordinary electrician's tape, no. For that purpose, that's one of the worst things you could use. There's special type of tape that's actually made for the purpose. By the way, it costs more than electrical tape too. But if you want to put together coaxial connectors outdoors, they should be, after they're connected and everything, they should be sealed with some of the proper kind of tape. Right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. He wouldn't dare disagree because I'm bigger than this. Besides, I'm right.
You're right. Absolutely.
All right. Oh, yes. Something I almost passed over. Maybe I should pull this one while we're talking about transmission lines and cables. And this gives me an opportunity to allow you to have a look at one more end connector type on a short piece of large diameter coaxial cable, end connectors, and also right angle end connectors. This I got from a surplus from Fair Radio in Ohio more than a decade ago. It was fairly cheap. Again, these connectors alone, bought new, would be worth about $50 a piece. Coaxial cable, a couple of bucks maybe. But even yet, I think it's the first time I've used them for anything. I've also put an adapter into one of these. It's an N adapter, it's what we call a barrel connector. It's a female on both ends, just to give you another idea of sort of things that are available out there. I don't mind you taking this apart, but please try not to twist these, which you can do, because you could end up breaking the connection inside. Matter of fact, they're both already a little bit loose. It could be that they've already been badly compromised. I've never tried to use them to find out.
What are you using on the K3? Are you using N or no?
Oh, and it's got HF, WHF connector in it, just like everybody else.
Okay.
This is a complete antenna. Complete 80-meter antenna, including the transmission line. What am I doing with a thing like that? Well, it's not mine. This is a little bit of a story behind it. A few years back, a friend of mine, a number of years back, a friend of mine was told by somebody he was talking to on the radio down in southern Ontario that electric fence wire would make a good antenna. Save yourself a lot of money too, because electric fence wire is a lot cheaper than copper wire. So he took the guy's advice. He didn't ask me, by the way. I'd have told him to forget it. But he went ahead anyway and built the thing. This wire you see here is electric fence wire. What? Anybody know what electric fence wire is made of?
Probably galvanized. Galvanized, maybe?
Aluminum. Galvanized what?
Steel.
Steel, yeah, actually, I guess, you don't galvanize anything but steel, I guess, do you? Anyway, zinc plated. Well, that's zinc plated iron, or steel, or something in between the two. Zinc is not as good a conductor as copper, and neither is iron or steel. So, right off the top, we can be sure that the losses in this are going to be greater than they would be for copper. As far as the transmission line goes, a piece of coax, this is one of the foam dielectric varieties. I don't think it's actually rated for outdoor use, but I don't know. So when we uncoil these two halves of the dipole, we end up with an 80-meter dipole. In other words, they're around 130 feet long. The gentleman did do a reasonably good and imaginative job for the center connection. That's just a cheap piece of plumbing plastic through which he has he's managed to make the connection with the center and filled up the gaps with silicon seal. Silicon seal is not all that easy to work with, and it looks to me like water might be able to get in there, especially under the influence of winds, and that would be a bad thing, because if water can get driven in there and find its way down into the coaxial cable, you're eventually going to have trouble. So what happened to this antenna? Well, he built it, and he told me he couldn't load it up, which means he couldn't match it. With his matching network, he couldn't get it to match up and something up. Well, I told him, in spite of the fact that it was lousy wire you're using, he should be able to load it up, but he couldn't. So when I went to visit him somewhat afterwards, he handed this thing to me and said, "Here, take it." Well, I was curious enough to want to know if I was right, whether it was possible to really load this up and make it work. Well, now, I wasn't going to pull down my antenna and pull this back up in its place. It's an awful lot of work, and then I'd only have to undo all of that again. So I just put it up as a very low antenna. The ends were no higher than I could reach. And furthermore, because my house is kind of in the way, I wasn't able to put it in a straight line, but I did get it up there. And I was able to match it. and it did work, but it did not work very well. The signal I was able to get out with it was definitely inferior compared to my normal antenna. And part of that, of course, is because it was much too low. After all, it was only at about 8 feet off the ground average, and my regular antenna is up about 35 feet. But I was able to match it, and I was able to use it, and I did make a couple of contacts with it. But I don't recommend it. Would anybody like it? Anybody want to go home with it?
Coax is useful.
This is the only use I've been able to make of this other than testing it, and I do not intend to use it again. And since I have doubts about the quality of the coaxial cable, mind you, it's perfectly usable indoors, but I'm not sure that it's all that useful indoors.
Would that wire stretch under load? Would it, maybe that's part of
You
the
mean this wire?
Yeah, well, maybe a stretch. In some way.
It should probably stretch less.
Oh, than copper.
Copper is relatively soft.
Okay.
However, the thing to use for antenna wire for amateur radio is what's known as copper weld. What copper weld is essentially a steel wire with a copper coating on the outside. Or you could put it the other way and say it's a copper wire with a steel core. In that sense, it's not all that much different than, oh shucks, what's that stuff that they use? High voltage transmission line. High voltage transmission line is aluminum, but it's got a steel core. And that's the right thing for the job, actually, but why it is, well, one reason, of course, is the fact that aluminum stretches fairly easily, too. But the steel core helps keep the lines from stretching too much. And I see it's time for a break. Shall we have a break?
Yes, please.
Good.
So this is, oh, is this a phone? What is this stuff?
Yeah, that's a phone battery.
Yeah, okay.
And, well, I don't have anything essentially wrong or against